The modern Korean workplace is a real paradox. On one hand, it's this incredible engine of productivity, but on the other, it seems to be going through this huge identity crisis. So today, we're going to peel back the layers, look at the data, the laws, and the unwritten rules to figure out what's really going on.
All right, let's just start with a number. One number, 1,901. So what is that? Well, that's the average number of hours a South Korean employee works in a single year. That is one of the highest figures in the entire developed world. Just let that sink in for a second.
But a number like that, as shocking as it is, it really doesn't tell the whole story, does it? It just makes you ask, why? Why is it so high? And that's the real question we're digging into today. What's the story behind that number?
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to look at it through three different lenses. First, we'll dive into the hard data. Then, we'll check out the official government rules. And finally, we'll explore maybe the most powerful force of all, the unwritten codes of the culture. All right, first up, the numbers. We're going straight to the source here, looking at the official data from Statistics Korea, or KOStat as it's known. This is going to give us that objective, black and white view of the situation.
And here's where that 1,901 number really comes into focus. You can see right here that South Korea's average working hours are way higher than the average for other developed nations in the OECD. And we're not talking about a tiny little gap. This is a massive difference. It's a really defining feature of the country's work culture. Okay, now let's break down who is doing all this work. Take a look at this. Over a third of all employees are what's called non-regular. Now, this is a huge deal because it usually means less job security, lower pay, and fewer benefits. This creates a really significant point of tension in the Korean economy.
But it's not all one-sided. At the same time, the data tells the story of just incredible economic growth. This timeline here tracks the steady climb of the average wage over the last couple of decades. So yeah, the hours are long, but you can't deny the economic progress has been real. The big question, though, is how is that progress being shared?
Okay, so that's what the data tells us. Now for our second lens, the official rulebook, we're going to shift gears from the statistics to the laws themselves, the ones laid down by the Ministry of Employment and Labor. These are the regulations that are supposed to be governing daily work life.
And right at the core of modern Korean labor law is this huge policy, the 52-hour work week. This was a really big deal, a landmark rule designed specifically to combat that culture of long hours we just talked about. The rule itself is pretty simple. You've got your 40-hour regular week plus a maximum of 12 hours of overtime. That's it.
And the way it works is, on paper, very clear. The law sets a 40-hour base week. Anything you work past that, up to that 12-hour limit, is overtime, and it has to be paid at a premium rate, 1.5 times your regular wage. Seems like a pretty straightforward system to protect workers, right? The law also draws a really sharp line between those two types of employees we saw in the data earlier. Regular employees, they get the open-ended contracts and the full package of benefits. But non-regular employees are a different story. They're on fixed-term, part-time, or temp contracts, and that means way fewer legal protections and a whole lot less stability. And this brings us to a really important question. We've seen the data showing these super long hours, and we've just looked at the laws that are literally designed to limit those hours. So it makes you wonder, if the rules are so clear, why does the reality on the ground, the actual day-to-day experience for so many employees, feel so completely different?
Well, the answer, or at least a big part of it, lies in our third and final lens, culture. Because let's be honest, it's often the unwritten rules, the social expectations, that really dictate what happens from 9 to 5, and often well beyond that.
Here's a perfect example. Hoshik. Now, this isn't just your casual after-work team dinner. These are often seen as mandatory events, basically an extension of the workday. This is where you're supposed to build loyalty and get that crucial face time with your bosses. It completely blurs the line between your personal life and your professional life. And to survive in this kind of environment, you need a skill called nunchi. It's this subtle art of reading the room, of sensing the mood and the hierarchy, of basically knowing what your boss wants before they even have to ask. In a lot of Korean offices, having good nunchi isn't just a bonus, it's a critical survival skill.
There's actually a famous Korean proverb that sums this up perfectly. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. What it means is that in the traditional workplace, group harmony is prized above almost everything else, especially individual ambition. So, you're expected to be a team player, and that often means you don't leave the office before your boss does, no matter what that 52-hour law might say.
So there you have it. We've got the data, we've got the laws, and we've got the culture. And if you look at them one by one, none of them really gives you the full picture. The real aha moment comes when you see how they all interact, how they overlap, and sometimes how they flat out contradict each other.
Let's just pull it all together here. Take working hours. The data says they're high, the law says they need to be capped at 52, but the culture, with things like Hoishik and Nunchi, often pushes those hours way beyond any official limit. And it's the same with hierarchy, right? The law defines a contract, but the culture demands a much, much deeper level of respect and deference to your seniors. This is where all the complexity and honestly the tension comes from.
And all of this leads to one final and I think really fascinating question. Right now, a new generation of Korean workers is coming in, and they have very different ideas about success. They're prioritizing things like work-life balance and personal fulfillment. So, as they start to push back against the old ways, you have to wonder, which one of these powerful forces, the hard data, the official laws, or that deeply ingrained culture, is going to be the first to give? And that right there is the space to watch.